What's up, everyone? Let's talk about dealing damage in World of Warcraft. So whether you want to be at the top of the meters, you want a good chance of getting into keys, or you're just looking to play something different and you kind of want to play the meta build right now, well, right now there is one that is strong, and it is Balanced Druid. Balanced Druid is currently S tier and at the top of S tier for high keys in Mythic Plus, and it's significantly holding its own as a massive damage dealer. If you switch over to Raid, you can see again, it is still significantly high on the damage meter. So today, I just wanted to do a basic Balanced Druid build guide. I want to go over the meta talents that people are using to get these really high numbers, and some basic rotation and understanding of how the build works, because a lot of people are going to switch over to this mid-season, and you want to get up there on the damage meters, you want to like get into the keys, and you want to run them pretty well. So I am by no means a pro. I am not a pro player, but I've done okay this season on my Balanced Druid. I've got like 2,300, done a few 10s. It's fine. It's good enough to show how the build works. This is if you're jumping into Balanced Druid, you've got no idea what the buttons do. Hopefully by the end of this, you can walk into a dungeon and perform pretty well. Okay, so first I'm just going to go to some training dummies and talk about how the build works, the buttons we press, why we press them, the priorities of different targets, things like that. So we do use the Elun's Chosen talents, by the way. That's like the meta right now for Mythic Plus. So that's what I would suggest. There's obviously people that run it the other way, but that's what I would suggest. The first thing we want to do is make sure we're in Moonkin form. So you want to pop Moonkin form, and then you want to make sure your Moonkin bars are set up. And we want to focus first on dots. So as we go into a fight, the first thing you want to do is dot up every target. If there are 2, dot them all up. If there are 5, all of them. 6, all of them. You want to make sure that every single enemy has a dot before you start doing your normal rotation. So we have 2 damage every time. So we have Sunfire and we have Moonfire. And you want to do that on all of them. With the way our talents are set up, casting 1 will actually put it on multiple enemies rather than just, single target. So if you cast, say, Moonfire first, there's a 22-second damage over time. And then you pop Sunfire, that's a 18-second damage over time. So if you do it in that order, they line up pretty well. You see they're going down around the same time, 12 and 10. If we trigger them like that, one and then the other, you can see they're both running like over 20 seconds. And they're going to run down around the same time to be reapplied. The first thing you want to do when you get a fight is dot up every target. So if this was like your circle of enemies, you would start by doing this. 1, 2, you see that applies to all, and then you need to spread this one around the rest. That's the first thing you want to do in a fight. This spreads to all enemies, Sunfire. This spreads to all enemies, so you just apply that once. But then Moonfire, you have to manually make sure in 2s that that's going on. So that's the first part of any fight. No matter how big the pack is, I would dot them up. Assuming the mobs are elites and they're going to stay alive for a fair while. If they're going to go down in like 3 seconds, 4 seconds, if it's trash, don't worry about it. But generally, that's the start of any fight. Okay, the second thing we want to do is get into our lunar eclipse. So before this version of how Druid works, you had to balance between solar eclipse and a lunar eclipse. And it was basically going between your Wrath and your Starfire to juggle these 2 eclipses. And if I go into the talent tree, it's these things here. One would power up Wrath and the other powers up your Starfire. However, with Elun's Chosen, we have this ability here called Lunar Calling, where we no longer trigger solar eclipse, but our Starfire deals more damage. So basically we gain like more of a benefit in Lunar Eclipse, but we gain no benefit from being in Solar Eclipse. So it makes the build much easier. So all we want to do is get into Lunar Eclipse. And Lunar Eclipse is a 15-second long buff where all of our arcane spells deal more damage. Now, it might seem like the first thing you want to do is drop this, Fury of Elune. Well, that's an astral spell, so no. First get into your Lunar Eclipse and then start dumping all of your spells. So the way to get into Lunar Eclipse is you either cast Incarnation Chosen of Elune. This will instantly put you into Lunar Eclipse, or you cast 2 Wraths. So what I would do is if you have a big pack, you dot everything up, you insta-pop the Incarnation, and then you go into Lunar Eclipse. When that's on cooldown, go into Wrath. So I'll show you with Wrath. You build it up twice. You go 1, 2, and then we trigger Lunar Eclipse. There you go. Now we have this big buff. And you see our Fury of Elune goes from doing 700,000 damage to 800,000 damage. So that's why the first thing you want to do is get into your Lunar Eclipse. So hopefully that makes sense. And then when it runs out, you'll see this will stop flashing and we go back down to 2. That's our way of knowing that we no longer have it. You can also track this with like a weak aura or an add-on to better see when you're in the eclipse. But if that's flashing, you're in the eclipse. That's the basic way of knowing. Okay, the second thing to do is just pop this and that will instantly put you into, Lunar Eclipse. And then you can just start unloading your damage if you want to. So yeah, that's Lunar Eclipse and how that works. Okay, so that's the intro. Dot your enemies up, get into Lunar Eclipse. Once you're in Lunar Eclipse, you need to start dealing damage. So how do we do that? Well, first things first, we drop Fury of Elune. Fury of Elune is going to be used on cooldown. As soon as you get it up, use it again, it just does tons of damage. So you can see here, if we get into lunar eclipse like we would normally, the first thing we do is we drop Fury of the Loon. This is just a big damage over time to all enemies that you don't have to worry about. And if enemies move, it will follow them. Or if you beat that enemy, it will move under that one. So it's a really good spell to just always be using. Okay, now let's talk about the generator spender side of this. So once we have done our little opener, we have to start generating astral power and then dumping it, using it. So the way we do that is we just use Starfire. You can use Wrath or Starfire, and you might be thinking, Wrath single target, Starfire AoE. However, we are boosting our Starfire by, Lunar Eclipse and by our Illusions Chosen. So I would just focus on getting Starfires out to build up your astral power, and then you spend it with either Star Surge for single target or Starfall for AoE. So if we use these as an example, you will do this. 2 of these to get into Lunar Eclipse. Once we hit Lunar Eclipse, then we start using the Starfires. And you can see here, we generate our astral power. A single use of Star Surge blasts an enemy once, and that's all it does. However, our Starfall does an AoE damage over time that can be overlapped. So you can get multiple of them off at the same time. And it extends the duration of both of your dots. So if we were to damage over time, these enemies, if you see now they have 15 to 20 seconds on them. If we now use 2 of these, they're back up to 16 seconds. So putting it all together, all it is dot, get into Lunar Eclipse, and do your rotation. So it's just, Sunfire, Moonfire, that's our dots up. Then we get into Lunar Eclipse, 1, 2, we drop our Fury of the Loon, we cast enough Starfires until we hit our, we cap out on our Astral Power, and then we drop Starfalls. And we keep our dots up with that as well. And we just go back to casting Starfires. And you can see the dots are starting to run out. We cast another one of these, and the dots are staying on. And that's pretty much all you'll be doing in a Mythic Plus. Okay, so that's the basic rotation. That's going to get you through pretty much most of the game except for high-end Mythic Plus. That's pretty much, all you need to know. And if you've just started a Druid, you don't know what any of the buttons do until now, you are clueless, just go play some dungeons. Just go play in the open world, do some delves, do some dungeons, and do that rotation. And you're most of the way there. But now I'm just going to give a few tips to get more out of your damage and some things to know in dungeons, that kind of thing. So the first is a tip of when to use your astral power. So obviously you use it when it's full, but here's something else you can do. When you fill up on your astral power, it's very easy to just dump it out straight away. However, one good habit of getting into is as you fill up, you see we have the lunar eclipse is about to fall off. We're just about to fall off, and we've just filled our astral power. Now is the perfect time to pop Incantation Fury Chosen of a Loon. You pop this, and you go straight back into Lunar Eclipse, so you can start using all your Starfalls. However, additionally, when we use that ability, not only do we instantly go into Lunar Eclipse, but with this talent down here, I think it's this one, you also gain 10% crit strike chance. So, it's a win-win. So not only are you going straight into Lunar Eclipse, you're getting the improved crit chance for when you're dropping all of your big Starfalls. So yeah, that's one tip you can do. Another thing you can do is if you're on the move, if you're in a mechanic that requires a lot of movement, what you can do is as soon as you can go into Lunar Eclipse that way, or you can use Chosen of a Loon to get into Lunar Eclipse. And then if you've got into Lunar Eclipse and you don't want to waste it, but you can't stand still, you pop this Warrior of a Loon. And that lets you cast Starfires without standing still. You get insta-cast a lot. So you can insta-cast them, and then Starfall is insta-cast as well. So you can kind of just jump around and do your full rotation. For a while, you get 5 or 6 casts pretty much without having to stand still. So that's another thing. The only other things are gear-wise, haste and mastery are your go-to stats. That's what you're going to be looking for in your gear. You can use the cartel chips if by the time you're watching this, if they're still in the game. The best in slot is your best in slot. Go and get that. It looks like when you go to get it, it looks like an agility item. So it looks like an agility mace. However, it has an active ability where you can turn it into an intelligence item. So that's your best in slot two-hander. I'd get that instant. Other than that, that's pretty much the basics. This isn't a super in-depth how to get to plus 15. This is just a beginner intro, so I don't want to make it too complex. But hopefully that's enough. If you do have any questions or you want more detail, do let me know down below. But thank you so much for watching. Take care, and I'll catch you on the next one.